Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of BNN with our favorite female monk, Soma, with a freshly shaved head. Look at that shiny dome. You can see the light glistening off her scalp. It's just magnificent, isn't it? So this is Soma. She looks like a monk. See, no hair. And today she's going to be talking about the 10 paramis, in particular the parami of sacca, of truthfulness. But first we're going to start by chanting the Ratana Sutta and doing some meditation together. So welcome joining in. Welcome to Jens, Gita, Jessica, Stacy, Ethan, Bradley, Sally, Yulia, Priyakant, Victor, and Liz. So wonderful. And Elaine, so wonderful to see all of you joining in. Elaine says, looking good, Ayasoma. I agree, there's nothing like a monk with a freshly shaved head to delight the mind. So once again, we'll start with chanting the Ratana Sutta. You can find the link at the top of the live chat. And we'll follow Ayasoma's lead.
All right, thank you, Bante. I'm happy that you're very excited about the shaving of the head, and welcome to all of you this evening. So as Bante mentioned, we will start by chanting the Ratana Sutta, and we will be dedicating it to all the people that are suffering due to the pandemic, and also to our friend Neil, who's having a hard time these days. And also to the memory of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and all the people who have been the victims, people of color who have been the victims of injustice in this country. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Yani da bhutani
Samagatani bhummani vayani vahantaleke. Sabe bhuta sumana bhavantu atopi sacca chasunantu bhasitam. Tasmahi bhutani sameta sabe metam kabrota manusiya pajaya. Devacharato chaharanti evaling tasmahi nerakata apamata. Yankinchi vitang intavahuram vasage suvayam ratanang panitam. Nano samangati tathagatena idampi buddhe ratanang panitam. Etena sachena suvati hotu. Kayang viragang amatang panitam yadachaga sakyamuni samahito. Natena dhammena samati kinchi yedampi dhamme ratanang panitam. Etena sachena suvati hotu. Yang buddha seto parivannai suching samadhi manantari kanyamahu. Samadhina tena samona vrijjati dampi dhamme ratanang panitam. Etena sachena suvati hotu. Ye Pungala Tasatang Pasata Chatari Tani Yugani Honti Te Dakineya Sugata Sasavaka Te Sudinani Mahapalani
Idampi Sanghe
Ratanam Panitam Ye Tena Sachena Suvati Hotu Ye supayutta manasa dalhena nikamino gotamasa sanamhi te pati pata matang vigaiha lanta mutanim muting punchamana Idampi sanghe ratanang panitang etena sachena suvati hotu Yatinda kilo pataving sito siya chatum vivate via sampakampiyo Tatu pamang samburisang vadami yo arya sachani avitshapasati Idampi sanghe ratanang panitang etena sachena suvati hotu Ye Arya Sachani Vibhavayanti Gambhira Panyena Sudesitani Kinchapi Te Honti Pusapamata Nate Bhavanga Tamanga Niyanti Idampi Sanghe Ratanang Panitang Etena Sachena Suvati Hotu Sahava sadasana sampadaya taya sudhamma jahita bhavanti Sakaya diti vichike chitancha silambatang va piyadati kinchi Chatuhapaye hichavi pamuto chachapithanani apambokatum Idampi sanghe ratanang panitang etena sachena suvati hotu Kinchapi sokam karoti papakam kayena vacha udacheta sava Avambo sotha sapatichadaya Vambata ditapada savuta Idampi sanghe ratanang panitang etena sachena suvati hotu Vanapagum me yatha pusitang manamase patamasming imhe Tatu pamang dhammavarang adesai nibbanagaming paramang hitaya Idampi buddhe ratanang panitang etena sachena suvati hotu Varo varanyu varado varaharo anutaro dhammavarang adesai Idampi buddhe ratanang panitang etena sachena suvati hotu Kinam Puranang Navam Nati Sambhavam Virata Cheta Yatake Bhavasming Te Kina Bija Virulhin Chanda Nimbanti Tira Yatayam Paripo Idampi sanghe ratanang panitang etena sachena suvati hotu Yani bhutani samagatani bhummani vayani vantaleke Tathagatam deva manusaputikam buddham namassama suvati hotu Yani bhutani samagatani bhummani vayani vantaleke Tathagatam deva manusapujitam dhammam namasamasubhati hotu. Yani bhutani samagatani bhummani vayani va antalike. Tathagatam deva manusapujitam sangham namasamasubhati hotu. Etena sacha vanjena dukavo pasamentu te. Etena sacha vanjena bhayavo pasamentu te. Etena sacha vanjena rogavo pasamentu te.
All right, so we can put ourselves in a comfortable position. Making sure our back is upright. Perhaps can rock the body from side to side. Finding a natural point for stillness in the body. And we can close our eyes. Taking a few deep breaths to relax into the body. Paying attention to every in-breath and out-breath. But focusing our attention to the nostrils. If the mind is restless, we gently bring it back to the breath. without scolding the mind, without getting frustrated, but just kindly bringing our attention back to the breath. Looking at the process of breathing with curiosity, without forcing it, just keeping the breath natural and watching it as it naturally flows inside and outside of our body. Changing in every moment. And in every moment, we're constantly aware of what it feels like. Aware of a new experience in all of its details. Relaxing our entire body with each in-breath and out-breath. Breathing in kindness, compassion, generosity. Breathing out irritation, anger, disappointment. And putting a smile on our face. We breathe in metta. If it helps, we can bring to the mind someone we really care about dearly, where there are no issues currently present. Perhaps it's one of our parents, perhaps it's one of our siblings, a best friend, a beloved pet, or just a kind neighbor, a considerate passerby, someone that whenever we bring them to the mind, we can easily wish them to be happy, peaceful, safe, healthy. Really bringing up, fueling this feeling of loving kindness, imbuing our mind with it, letting it pervade our entire experience. Nourishing it, watering it, creating the right conditions for it to grow and flourish, like it were a baby plant, a little seedling that needs all our care and kindness to grow in full bloom. And if it helps, we can use a mantra in our head, wishing for everyone to be happy, peaceful, safe, free from suffering, and really meaning it. Giving strength to our well-wishing, and reaping strength from our well-wishing. That lets our loving kindness grow in full bloom. letting our loving kindness open up our heart. Make us happier while wishing happiness to everyone, including ourselves. You can relax. Stretch our bodies if we need to.
Okay, thank you, Aya, and welcome to Marielle and Richard. Happy to see you joining in as well. And at this time, we can invite Ayasoma to give a Dhamma talk. So please go ahead.
So the subject tonight is the parami of truthfulness, sacca. And for the past couple of days, I've been avoiding watching a particular video. I read the news, I got informed, and 2 hours ago, I decided to watch this video of the killing of George Floyd. And I knew already that it was disturbing, which is why I was avoiding watching it. And I was kind of telling myself that it was not really very important to watch it, but just being aware of the causes and conditions, of the facts. But I had to come to a certain point to terms with this sort of avoidance. And I was like, why are you so reticent in watching it? Because I had watched another video, which is actually the video of before, like as he was stopped, but not. Then there is the second video of when he's actually, when the policeman has a foot on his neck and kills him. And I was like, well, if I have to give a talk on truthfulness, I have to really be capable of looking at this truth, watching it, seeing it for myself, really dealing with it. So I did, and it was horrible, to say the least. And it's just so upsetting. So upsetting that there is such systemic oppression of many people, but in particular Black people in this country. And I think it's important, very important as Buddhist practitioners and as even non-Buddhist practitioners, just as people in society, to be willing 100% to face this truth, as unpleasant as it is, as horrible as it is, as atrocious as it is, denounce it, and support the people who are trying to create a better truth for everyone here. So yeah, as a female monastic, I've dealt with a bit of oppression in life. I kind of had the flavor of it, but never to the extent of fearing to be treated in that way by public officials. To that extent, anyway. Never felt the risk of my life being threatened systemically. So it's an inconvenient truth that is very important to face, understand, once again, and denounce, and try to make change. Whenever there is oppression of any sort, but especially systemic oppression of any groups of people, It's everyone's problem, everyone's issue. And when we are not looking at it, not really fully understanding it, we are cultivating delusion. If we pretend that something is not there, or that it's not as bad, we don't see it it's in full entity, we're just cultivating delusion. And that is not practicing the Buddhist way. That is not practicing the teachings of the Buddha. And so there are two types of truth that we talk about in Buddhism. There is conventional truth and ultimate truth. And a lot of times we use ultimate truth to justify our obliviousness of conventional truth, or to justify not caring about conventional truth, or to justify not taking any parts or any sides when it comes to conventional truth. My understanding of the Buddhist teaching is not that there is an acceptance of relative truth, or relativism, or whatever you call it, but rather there is a commitment, a vow, it's a precept that we take not to lie, which means that by not lying, we create the conditions for us to get more in sync with conventional truth. And by getting more in sync with conventional truth, we create the conditions to have a deep realization of the Four Noble Truths, all the way to arahatship. So the absolute truth, how things are. But we can't skip the in-between stage of conventional truth. We can't overlook it. We can't pretend it's not there and step all the way to absolute truth, because then it just is a conventional idea of absolute truth. That's the only thing we can realize. But we can't understanding the truth of suffering. We can't understand the cause of suffering, which is desire. We can't understand the cessation of suffering, and we can't understand the way out of suffering if we don't go through conventional truth. If we are indifferent, if we don't care, if we have the privilege not to care, about the reality of people. So I'm a little bit upset. So I think I'll end it there. Until maybe can say something.
Well, thank you, Aya, for your heartfelt words. Yeah, I really appreciate your willingness to speak about this topic and to address it in such a straightforward way.
So I'm unenlightened, so whenever I see suffering of others, unfortunately, I react with creating more suffering.
And AK says it's all right to cry.
Yeah, it's just really terrible. But this is also part of understanding the First Noble Truth. Like really saying this really sucks. This is awful. It's awful. People are killed for no reason. It's just awful that there is a system that is supposed to protect everyone, but actually oppresses some people. It is absolutely awful. And this is part of the First Noble Truth of suffering. If we pretend that this is not there, if we don't allow ourselves to really see this, really acknowledge this, really watch this, then this path becomes just so many pretty words. How can we talk about compassion? How can we talk about empathy? How can we talk about loving kindness? It has to be backed up with action. It has to be, how can we change the conditions, the causes and conditions that create this suffering? Because we're talking about not even existential suffering here, we're talking about suffering that can be resolved. This is created by structures in society that can be changed by humans. We can't do anything about old age, sickness, and death, but yes, we can change our minds. Yes, we can change the infrastructures. Yes, we can change the system. And by changing this, by really understanding this, I feel then we can get closer and closer to understanding, awakening. But we can't overlook the suffering of people when it's in front of our eyes. All right. I think I had to say what I had to say.
Well, thank you very much, Aya. So at this time, if anyone has any questions or comments, please feel free to type them into the live chat, and I'll read them out for Aya to answer. So there's a few comments already. So Marielle says, regarding the video, Marielle says, I haven't had the strength to watch it. Stacy says, thank you for the meditation and thank you for discussing this topic with us. Stacy says, I cried right before and during our meditation too. Edward says, welcome to America. Gita says, it's a very sad situation that is in many, many countries where law enforcement turns against the innocent citizens of their countries. There's actually been a huge problem in the Philippines in recent years of police killing people without any legal justification. For example, Kam says, Aya, thank you for sharing your thoughts and emotion with us. It's been so difficult for me the last many days processing this painful reality. Racism against the African American communities by systems, and racism against Asians due to COVID-19. Bradley says, thanks, Aya, and he has a little flower emoji. Sally says, sadhu for Aya's compassion. And Gita says, thank you, Aya, for being brave and sharing your thoughts.
I wasn't planning for it to be a dramatic talk, but sometimes it is how it is.
And I think it's really important to face samsara without turning away, to acknowledge this is the way it is.
Yeah, but also understanding, very important, that we can always do something about it. That it's very easy to just kind of say, well, this is the nature of things, and this is the nature of samsara, especially in Buddhist practice, amongst Buddhist practitioners. You'll hear that a lot. Oh, well, this is the nature of samsara, so there is nothing that we should do. But that's not quite the case. That is, once again, the difference between absolute reality and conventional reality. This is something that we can change. Perhaps we cannot change every single injustice happening in the world, but yes, we can change the injustice that is happening right in front of our eyes. So if you're in the Philippines, yes, you can try to change something that is happening right there in front of your eyes. But if you're here in the United States, yes, you can do something to change, to shift the conditions for this extreme level of oppression being placed on groups of people. So we always have a choice. And whenever we go for inaction, whenever we close an eye, we're creating the karma of indifference. We're creating also the conditions for other people not to care about our suffering. It actually occurred to me today. It was like, how much more do I care about, for example, the condition of being, the oppression of women, now that I am a woman who is facing a bit of oppression. Once my privilege has been removed, then I start caring. But we should aim to create the conditions to care in the first place. Not wait until we're in a situation where we don't have the privilege anymore to close a blind eye. So that's, for me, Buddhist practice. That is not crying in front of the camera. That is not Buddhist practice. Buddhist practice is generating a heart of compassion, of caring in every single moment when you are not the person who's being the subject of oppression, caring that other people are facing suffering. That is Buddhist practice, caring. So whenever we have difficulties, whenever we are experiencing indifference, carelessness from others around us, well, that should be not a condition for self-pity, but rather it should be a fertile soil for us to cultivate caring for others more and more, understanding that when we are very selective on what we care, then we can't complain if others don't care about our suffering. So really generating that mind of, I am here for you, I understand, let me see how I can help. And trying to make a difference. And that to me is a vehicle towards awakening.
Okay, there's a few more questions and comments. Well, Elaine says, I had avoided it too. I just watched it. I am speechless. Sally says, what shall we do when there's a conflict between protecting ourselves and telling the truth? For example, if someone is Muslim and have to go back to his country and he can't tell that he is Buddhist, he has to pretend something else. Is this breaking the precepts? But telling truth will bring danger. Hard choice. Save the life in the first place and then use the life to practice. Is that okay? If it has to conflict with the precepts, even on a minor level, that others might not think it's an issue?
I would say that there are extreme situations in which we have to voluntarily understand that we're going to get mixed karma. So this is an extreme situation, the one that you mentioned. So for example, someone who's going to Muslim country, now not all Muslim countries are that way, but there are a few where if you have converted, so normally if someone was born Muslim in certain Muslim countries, they cannot convert by law. So it's illegal. So if you go back, then there is the situation where you have to lie in order to get by. So that's, in my opinion, no different than the situation that, for example, a lot of people during Second World War, when Jewish people were being oppressed and killed during the genocide that we all know about by the Nazis. So then they would, some really ethical people would host Jewish people, Jewish families in their homes. And then when the Nazis would come, they would lie about the fact that there weren't any Jewish people in their homes. So in that situation, there is mixed karma. It is undeniable that you are breaking the precept, but it's undeniable that the amount of goodness that is being generated by that act is countless. So I would say that that is kind of like a drop of the classic sort of simile of a pinch of salt in a really big pool of water. The pinch of salt is still there, but it doesn't really taste much salty, the water, because there is a lot of goodness at the same time in the action. So I would say the ideal situation is not being in that situation to begin with. So not being in an extreme situation where you have to break the precept. But once again, not everybody has the privilege to be in that situation. But yes, I would say that what is the intention there? Once again, is the biggest motivator. Is your intention to deceive someone, or is your intention to protect someone? Then the intention to protect is very wholesome. The intention to deceive is very unwholesome. So I would say that the majority of people who are Buddhists and quote unquote lie about themselves being Buddhist, they don't do it to deceive, but rather to protect themselves and others through this action. No different than what happened in Nazi Germany.
Okay. And Bradley says, what are some ways we can ground ourselves when we have to face a difficult truth? Sometimes that's a truth in the world or a truth in ourselves. The beautiful things are easy to look at, joyful even, but the ugly ones are painful, hard to look at. But as we can see, it's necessary to face it. How can we do that without feeling overwhelmed or other negative mind states?
So I would say that clearly I actually gave kind of an answer figuratively during this evening sharing. So I'm a big believer in better out than in. Also, culturally, I am incapable, as you've seen just earlier, to keep it in. So if it's there, out. I was trying also earlier to do the repression method. I was like, oh, dear, I'm being filmed. That's terrible. And then I exploded. So I'm not quite sure how people of Anglo-Saxon descent, especially, but a lot of people, also not Anglo-Saxons, I think you actually mentioned something along those lines, how they manage to repress feelings, because it's really very difficult for me. It's a very interesting art technique. But anyway, I would say if like I had this conversation 4 years ago, I would have cried probably for half an hour, nonstop, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, I don't know. And now it's just still there. So I'm still overwhelmed, but the overwhelming happens for a short while. But it's important to also go through that, to not feel shame. Still working on it. Obviously, I was feeling ashamed just earlier, and I wanted things for it to be different, but not to the degree that I used to in the past, which then would make things worse and worse and worse. So just watching and understanding that that is the process that we're going through, dealing with things. And the more we practice this way, then the more equanimity arises, fully understanding, and it creates more room for action, as we were discussing, for not just feeling bad that everything sucks, but rather acknowledging, well, this is really pretty awful situation. So really keeping the critical thinking, getting rid of whether it's anger or extreme depression or extra suffering, clearing up that and creating room for compassion in action. So really thinking, well, how can I support, for example, organizers that really have been working on figuring things out for countless of years, decades, centuries, actually, in this country, in the particular issue that we were talking about earlier. So seeking guidance in that way, or more than guidance, like seeking how to support people who know how to do their job, creating room for people to supportive conditions for people to change the status quo. But yeah, it first has to come with acknowledging that the situation is shitty and that we are having, rightly so, a strong reaction towards it. Until we pretend that that shouldn't be there, or we have aversion towards it, or we are deluded of our experience, then there's no understanding of suffering to be had. It's like feces on the floor. You can cover it up as much as you want, but it's still there. The only way to get rid of feces is to look at it, smell it, and clean it up while you're doing this. So it's unpleasant, but we gotta get our hands dirty.
Okay. And Elaine says, "You are a beautiful person, Aya. You are a blessing to the world."
Oh, you're too kind.
Marielle says, "What is the ultimate truth? That there is suffering?"
The Four Noble Truths. So ultimately, how things are. So there is suffering is only one partial truth. But it's not just like, oh, there is suffering, but rather there is suffering. What is the suffering like? So fully understanding the suffering of others, fully understanding our suffering, and understanding that there is no difference between the two of them. That our suffering is nothing special. It is an existential suffering. Then understanding deeply the cause, understanding that the cessation of suffering is possible. And for example, if you've been really depressed, I'm pretty sure you remember that in those situations, the third noble truth wasn't even remotely capable. We weren't even remotely capable of contemplating its existence, let alone getting to an understanding of how to get out of suffering. So the Noble Eightfold Path. But all of these, once again, there was one of my favorite teachers, Venerable Robina Courtin. She is an Australian Tibetan monastic who once came to, actually she's come several times, but once she was giving this talk in the East Village for Buddhist Insights. And it was on social activism, actually. And at a certain point, she was talking about the Four Noble Truths, and one of the ladies in the crowd raised their hands and was like, "Well, okay, that's all well and good with these Four Noble Truths, but when do we get to the advanced stuff?" And Venerable Robina Courtin would turn around. She was like, "This is the advanced stuff." Like, we don't have to wait for the advanced stuff. This is the advanced stuff. If we think that this is beginner stuff, then that is basically the answer to ourselves, that we haven't understood at all what the Four Noble Truths are. So it's kind of no different than watching the breath, you know? If you just read it in a book, you're like, okay, breathing in and breathing out. You're like, okay, duh, I do it all the time, whatever. But then you start doing it. You start having an experiential understanding of the breath. And one day you realize that you have no idea that you even breathe. Two, that like it's very difficult to even pay attention to the breath. Something that you do all the time. So you start understanding suffering and the causes of suffering just by watching the breath, for example, something so common, something so seems elementary. The struggle there, and you start understanding the incredible wisdom of the teachings of the Buddha. So simple, but so difficult at the same time, so challenging. So that's once again, we are aiming at understanding truly how things are. But you know, it's kind of like, this is how things are. So it's a white cup, and normally we're like this, and we're like, oh yeah, it's a red envelope. Yeah, sure. So this is our understanding of the world normally. So what we're trying to do with Buddhist path is shifting our perspective and really looking at it. And then we're like, okay, now I understand what this is, what it's all about. But you know, you can't, people describe it. If you've never seen a white cup, it's just words. You're still going to think that it's no different than the red envelope. But in fact, you're not even like looking at the red envelope. So actually the red envelope is just a unicorn with polka dots. So that's why it has to go through really watching your experience, really understanding the workings of the mind, really going through your emotions, facing everything, and questioning why you're reacting in one way or the other. Had I not questioned, for example, why I was avoiding watching that particular video, I would have just cultivated delusion, which is kind of, oh yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, I can be in, like, you know, my privileged sort of state of being right now in the suburbs of New Jersey, gardening outside in the heat with the cute chickens and the cute cat and the nice monk and the nice other monk and the nice layperson that came to help. So there are so many ways through which we can get deluded and not really face lots of things. So yeah, it's very important to question every moment. Why are we thinking in a particular way? Why are we focusing on one particular side? Nuance of the story. Why do we care about more? Why do we care more about certain people versus the other? Where is it coming from? Is it our cultural conditioning? Is it, what is it? Is it our beliefs, our thoughts, our political views? And breaking them down, really looking at them, seeing that those are not who we are. Those don't define us. But unless we actually look at these things, we really see them, then we can keep on, then all of this stuff becomes just fluff. It's just cute little words on a book. Oh yeah, there is no self. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, may everyone be happy. Oh yeah, may we all be compassionate. Oh yeah, there's suffering, but like today is like so great. There's so much like sun outside. Is this spiritual practice? No. Yeah. I mean, we shouldn't be flogging ourselves either. I'm not suggesting that, but we should really look, investigate our thinking, our actions, our reality, our experience.
So Marielle said, this was a while back, she said, the karma of indifference. That's a good way of putting it. Then Sally has a couple more questions. Sally says, thank you, Aya. The example of the Buddhist who needs to protect himself, how to turn intention into more wholesome karma. Because the family saving the Jewish people, there is non-self. I think by that she means not self-centered. But protecting oneself, there might be self-attachment mixed in. Wise attention, considering oneself just as a sentient being, or like she's asking, like, how can we make it more wholesome karma?
By understanding that caring about oneself is actually something wholesome, and that there is no caring of other people unless we care about ourselves. It's interconnected, and there's no caring about ourselves if we don't care about others. It's really interconnected. So playing the martyr, like in the particular thing that you sort of episode that you described, so you go to Malaysia, maybe I think Malaysia has you can't convert from Muslim to Buddhist.
I know Iran. Oh yeah, Malaysia. Yeah. Malaysia, Iran, some other countries. I forget.
Malaysia, I heard it's actually a great place where to go. But if you're born Muslim, they have a law that you can't convert to Buddhist. They have Buddhist people that live happily there, but the Buddhist can convert to Muslim, but the Muslim can't convert to Buddhist. So I'm not quite sure of the details, but let's say if it's in fact illegal to go there and say, hey, by the way, I decided that the Buddha is great. Really understanding, going, saying, well, I am committed to this practice, to Buddhist practice. I see the value of it. Committed to the teachings for awakening. So in order to practice, I need to protect my practice. So if it's a form, it's not that you're lying, you're deceiving. That's not your intention, to deceive the government, but rather your intention is to keep the practice towards liberation. And unfortunately, it's a bad situation that you're put in. But the intention is, once again, not to break the law, but rather to practice. And unfortunately, there's lots of unethical laws in the world. Just because something is legal doesn't make it moral. So during the Nazis, it was legal to persecute Jewish people. It was not that they were illegally doing it, it was legally done. slavery was legal here in this country. So there's lots of immoral things that are made legal, which is why it's always important to look at what does the Buddha say? What is wholesome and what is unwholesome? And when you have two things that are unwholesome, lying and being oppressed, you're put in an unfortunate circumstance. But the most wholesome thing to do is pointing your mind towards the wholesome, which is practicing the Dhamma rather than deceiving. Does that make sense? So always looking. Now, if your intention is uniquely to deceive the government or deceive the people or deceive whoever, then that is unwholesome. You'll have your answer. But also self-sacrifice is unwholesome. There's no difference between sacrificing yourself or others for sort of an idealistic kind of way of practicing truthfulness. You're harming a being.
And Sally says, the salt simile is inspiring. Like Angulimala killed 99 people and got enlightened after he met the Buddha. Most people don't have that kind of parami. But if we lost this life, it's even harder to say whether we can encounter Buddhism in the next life to get enlightened or not. So if the intention is enlightenment for this life, maybe it's a broad sea of wholesome kamma with a little bit of salt of breaking precepts kamma.
Yeah, I would always say that. Clearly, that's actually what got me in robes. I was being a convert Buddhist. I noticed that's the biggest difference between convert Buddhists, for the most part, or at least monastics anyway. That we know what life was, before Buddhism. So I remember how difficult navigating in samsara was up until I actually started practicing Buddhism. So when you're born Buddhist, on the other hand, it's kind of like it's always been there. Like, oh, this is great. Okay, but I can obey next life or the life afterwards or whatever. But I was like, whoa. Actually, once I started, I don't like the word believing in rebirth, but understanding rebirth, because once I understood it, it wasn't a belief anymore. It's just like, duh, like obviously this is how things are. It couldn't be anywhere else. Then this, became, the struggle was real. I think it was Kevin the other day that was like talking about, the relief of that death comes, that then, when you start thinking in terms of rebirth, then all the relief that you put on death just disappears. That was my experience. At a certain point, I had a slight depression. I wouldn't call it depression, but kind of like, I was like, oh, this is terrible. Then now I believe in rebirth, because even like the kind of consolation of death has been removed from my life. I'm like, oh my God, this struggle is real. Like I'm gonna be reborn and having to go through all over again. Oh dear, adolescence was horrible. Like, having to figure out what I wanted to do in life was horrible. Like having to, like, all the sort of the stress of samsara, all the way to then finding the Buddhist teachings. Not once, but twice, because the first time I was a little bit like the guy that met the Buddha after the awakening. That the Buddha, spoke Dhamma. He was like, yes, I'm the fully awakened being. And the guy was like, yeah, right, cool, man. So I went to the Buddhist monastery. I was like, oh, this is all interesting. And then I was talking to Ashinatala, my first Buddhist monk, who was saying lots of interesting things. And then we had the usual conversation on suffering. And I was like, yeah, I'm okay with suffering. It's all cool. Like, it's just part of life. Like, whatever. It's all well and good. I'd see you later. And then that meant other 4 or 5 years of of dukkha and depression and struggle, sorrow, lamentation, all of this mass of suffering. And then, after having gone through all of that, then I found, luckily, Buddhism, and once again, and my mind had better conditions to go like, yeah, I kind of get that suffering now that you guys are talking about. Oh, let me try this out. But oof, did it take me? So yeah, I do remember clearly. And yes, we should. I mean, my personal objective is to attain awakening in this lifetime. But in terms of actually to be realistic, my objective is to attain stream entry in this lifetime. That's all I want. Stream entry is cool because then it's a done deal, as they say.
Okay, and Stacy says, we need to take compassionate anti-racist action. Thank you, Aya. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And Marielle says, but that's an important thing as well, the self-caring part before helping others. In my case, I hosted and organized a webinar on Thursday with local professionals to talk about a case of sexual assault and violation that has been on the news lately. I planned it on 3 days, and I had never done that before. The point is that after it was over, I was so exhausted emotionally and mentally that yesterday I didn't do a thing. And even this morning, I was still feeling a little bit drained. To watch a very serious, but also not even local assassination of a person is not a thing I can do, at least not today. It's about balancing, because otherwise I will not be useful for any cause or myself.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a very important thing that you raised, though, which is good. But you're also coming from a perspective of someone who's already pretty socially engaged. So also to consider that. So you need to also, it seems actually you've done already what I was kind of putting forward, which was an investigation of your motivations. So really understanding what is being real, keeping it real, going, okay, well, if I exhaust myself, then there's very little that I can do. So what is my current situation? And then having an appropriate response based on that assessment, rather than going, oh, well, I don't want to do this or I don't want to do that. So investigating, once again, our experience. But keeping in mind that Buddhist practice, so following the Noble Eightfold Path, then creates the conditions for us to be constantly capable of engaging. So the reason why we get exhausted, the reason why we get drained, the reason why I had the sort of emotional breakdown a couple of minutes ago is because I'm not awakened yet. It's because I'm still practicing, still developing all these paramis. So the more we develop all of these, the more we become, our mind becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. And then we're capable of dealing with lots of different things. If you see someone like Thich Nhat Hanh, for example, incredible being, not only socially engaged in terms of organizing, but being on the field in Vietnam during the war, working with both sides, mind-blowing. So when you see practitioners of this caliber, then you get a sense, a palpable sense of how precious this practice is, how much strength it builds, strength of mind it builds. So then you're fearless. There is no capability for you to get exhausted, no capability for you to waste energy in unwholesome emotions, but have only room for the wholesome. So even though I haven't reached that stage yet, I have to say that I have made, as I'm practicing, I see this is what builds my faith in this practice. I see that the unwholesome is diminishing and the wholesome is It's building up and building up, building up. And my reactions to things are very different. I respond to things rather than react to things more and more. Sometimes I still react, just like I did earlier. Keeping it real, very truthfulness in 3D tonight on on BNN. Yeah, so but also being aware of the unenlightenment, being aware of everything that is currently creating the markup of the situation, but also being aware of the progress and going, well, yes, I'm going in the right direction. Yes, I'm practicing these teachings. Yes, this is creating much happiness and progress in the path.
And Sally says, Sadhu, may Aya's wish of stream entry become true.
May we all become stream enters for the benefit of all beings.
And that's the last of the questions and comments.
All right.
So if there's nothing else, then we can go ahead and end it there. Oh, wait, one more thing. Sally asks, if someone breaks one country's rule or not following the rule strictly, and the intention is wholesome, even not involving telling a lie by mouth, just bodily action, is this breaking the precepts or not? If so, which precept?
It's just breaking the law. It has nothing to do with precepts. Precepts is, I'm also Italian, so you know, there's that. If you ask a German monk, they might have a different answer. But there might be some cultural conditioning influencing my answer. But yeah, I would say that the point of reference, once again, is not the rules of a country. There's a lot of bizarre rules in each country. Also, a lot of great rules in each country. But once again, are they in accordance with Dhamma or are they not in accordance with Dhamma? If tomorrow they order me to kill sentient beings by law, I will break that law. I will not kill sentient beings because it's against my precepts. It's as simple as that. So always going back to the Dhamma and seeing what the Buddha said rather than thinking about it too much.
Sally says, then I like Italy, monk. Smiley face. And Edward says, as a 63-year-old black man in the USA, the conditions that created this man's death has not turned me to hate.
Oh, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Bless your beautiful heart. This is Edward?
Yeah.
Oh, bless you.
And Elaine says, thank you, and may all beings be free from suffering. And that's it for questions and comments. So I think that's it for tonight. Once again, thank you, Aya, for the very heartfelt, honest, and straightforward statement. Edward says, love you, Aya.
Oh, we love you too, Edward.
Thank you all for joining in and for discussing the Dhamma with us. And we'll see you tomorrow. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.